The story begins with a ripple, a small leak whispered out of the production offices of Married at First Sight Australia. At first, it didn't sound real. It was dismissed as another rumor, another clickbait headline feeding off the endless hunger for scandal around the reality juggernaut. But then, whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs hardened into something undeniable. The next season of MAFS, airing in 2026, would feature something the Australian version had never dared to do before: a gay couple at the altar. For years, viewers had watched strangers paired up by so-called experts, thrown into the pressure cooker of instant marriage, awkward honeymoons, and explosive dinner parties. It was messy, chaotic, sometimes hilarious, and often heartbreaking. But always, the formula was the same: straight couples, season after season, locked into a cycle of the familiar. Fans had grown cynical. They'd seen affairs. They'd seen wine glasses shatter across dinner tables. They'd seen promises broken in commitment ceremonies where vows sounded more like courtroom confessions. The show thrived on chaos, but the chaos had started to feel stale. Audiences began to ask, when would MAFS do something genuinely new? When would it reflect the messy, diverse realities of love in modern Australia? That is why the leak felt seismic. For the first time, a same-sex couple would be part of the experiment. The announcement didn't come with glossy press releases or slick promos. It slipped out the way most real stories do, through whispers, through anonymous sources claiming to know what the cameras had already captured. The producers hadn't planned to go public yet. They wanted to keep it close, to build suspense, to unveil the couple with fireworks and headlines on their own terms. But the truth had a way of spilling out, and now the conversation was everywhere. The idea of two men or two women standing at the altar in front of family, friends, and an audience of millions struck at the core of what MAFS had always been. Could the show handle it? Could the audience? On social media, the reactions poured in. Twitter lit up with excitement from fans who had waited years for this moment. Finally, one user wrote, "MAFS Australia is stepping into the real world." Another tweeted, "Representation matters, even in reality TV." Memes began circulating, some celebratory, others skeptical. But not everyone was convinced. Some viewers saw it as nothing more than a stunt, a desperate ploy to juice up ratings in a franchise that had already leaned heavily on controversy to stay relevant. "They'll ruin it," one critic claimed. "This won't be about love. It'll be about drama." And perhaps that was the point. Married at First Sight had never been purely about romance. It was about conflict as much as connection. It was about testing what happens when people are forced into the most artificial version of marriage imaginable and then filmed as the experiment unravels. With a gay couple in the mix, the formula was about to be rewritten. Behind the scenes, the producers knew exactly what they were doing. MAFS had long been accused of playing it safe, of sticking to predictable dynamics and predictable fights. A gay couple brought with it the potential for something unfamiliar: new alliances at the dinner table, new kinds of rivalries, new forms of empathy and misunderstanding. It wasn't just another storyline, it was a storyline that would ripple through every corner of the season. And anyone that this wasn't happening in a vacuum. Around the world, reality television had slowly begun to shift. Other international versions of Married at First Sight had already featured LGBTQ+ participants. Audiences had seen glimpses of how the experiment changed when love was no longer boxed into heterosexual pairings. But for Australia, this was uncharted territory. That cultural context made the move feel heavy, loaded with meaning. For many, it symbolized progress. For others, it symbolized exploitation. But either way, it symbolized change, and change was something MAFS desperately needed. As the news spread, speculation grew. Who were the couple? Would the producers choose two men or two women? Would they be matched for compatibility or cast purely to ignite fireworks? Would the experts, the psychologists and relationship coaches, approach this match differently than the others, or would they pretend the experiment was unchanged? Nobody knew for sure. And that uncertainty is what made it so tantalizing. The weddings were already being whispered about. Producers were reportedly bracing themselves for the reaction of families. Would every relative embrace the union on camera, or would there be tears, objections, and walkouts? MAFS weddings were never free of drama, but with a gay couple at the altar, the stakes felt higher. Every look, every hesitation, every smile would be dissected, not just as personal moments, but as cultural signals. Then there were the dinner parties, the gladiatorial arena of married at first sight. This was where alliances formed and collapsed in real time, where gossip spread like wildfire, where one cutting remark could ignite a feud that lasted weeks. How would the gay couple fit into this volatile mix? Would they find allies, or would they be outsiders, forced to defend themselves not only as individuals but as symbols of something larger? Every possibility was loaded with drama. Every potential storyline felt like new ground. But beneath the excitement, there was also a question that hung in the air like smoke. Could MAFS handle this responsibly? Reality television was not known for its kindness. It thrived on pushing buttons, on creating situations where people cracked under pressure. Audiences loved it for that, but critics loathed it. Adding a gay couple to the mix wasn't just about representation, it was about risk. If handled poorly, it could backfire spectacularly. And yet, that's what made it irresistible. The experiment had always been about risk. Risking heartbreak. Risking humiliation. Risking the chance that you'd find your face splashed across tabloids for weeks. For the first gay couple in MAFS Australia, the risk would be doubled. They weren't just stepping into a marriage with a stranger. They were stepping into history, into a spotlight that would magnify every fight, every kiss, every confession. Somewhere in the vaults of Channel 9, footage already existed. The first awkward glances, the vows exchanged, the nervous laughter, the hesitant kisses. Somewhere, editors were already piecing together the story that would soon be unveiled to the world. And outside, audiences waited, ready to cheer, ready to criticize, ready to argue about whether MAFS had finally grown up, or whether it had just found another way to stir chaos. One thing was certain. Married at First Sight Australia 2026 would not be like any season before it. The leak had only just begun to settle into the public consciousness when the debates grew louder, sharper, and more relentless. The question of why now echoed across headlines. Why had it taken Married at First Sight Australia so many years to make this leap, when the franchise elsewhere had already crossed that bridge? The answer wasn't simple. For years, producers had quietly weighed the possibility. Internally, it had been a topic of discussion during casting seasons. But each time, concerns were raised. Would it work? Would the mainstream audience accept it? Would advertisers hesitate to back the show if it became too polarizing? Television, after all, is not only about representation. It is about money, ratings, and the precarious balance between risk and reward. Until now, the risk had always seemed too high. But the world was changing. Younger viewers, the demographic most hooked into MAFS, were not just open to diverse love stories, they were demanding them. Streaming platforms were filled with shows that no longer shied away from LGBTQ+ representation. Social media influencers openly celebrated their relationships. The idea that MAFS could continue on season after season, pretending that marriage was only a heterosexual experiment, was beginning to feel not just outdated, but absurd. And so, producers finally rolled the dice. The gamble was enormous. A gay couple was not simply another pair among the cast. They would inevitably become the story. Whether they wanted to or not, their every word, every action, would be held under a magnifying glass. If they flourished, the season would be hailed as groundbreaking. If they stumbled, the critics would sharpen their knives. The leaked reports suggested that the casting team had gone to extraordinary lengths to find the right match. They were not simply looking for individuals willing to sign up for reality TV chaos. They were looking for participants who could carry the weight of representation on their shoulders, even if they hadn't asked for it. And that was the cruel paradox. Married at First Sight had never been a gentle experiment. The show thrived on stress-testing relationships, on throwing people into conflicts designed to push them to breaking point. For every couple who found lasting love, there were 5 who ended up in disaster. And now, into this arena, The producers were placing their first gay couple. Already, fans speculated about the first meeting at the altar. Would the families be supportive? Would there be tears of joy? Or would there be resistance caught in the unflinching eye of the camera? MAFS weddings were infamous for their drama, and the thought of a same-sex couple exchanging vows in that environment added another layer of tension. But it wasn't only about the weddings. The real storm would come later, at the dinner parties, the infamous battleground of the show. In every season, the dinner parties were the crucible where secrets spilled, alliances fractured, and tempers exploded. What role would the gay couple play in this volatile social mix? Would they be embraced, forming friendships and alliances, or would they find themselves isolated, battling subtle judgments and whispered gossip? Every scenario was loaded with narrative potential. Every possible outcome promised headlines. For the fans, speculation became a game of its own. Online forums buzzed with theories. Some believed the couple would be two men, chosen because their personalities clashed in just the right way to create fireworks. Others argued it would be two women, casting light on a softer, more emotional journey. A few even believed that the producers might cast two couples, doubling the drama and ensuring no single storyline overshadowed the rest.